Hello again. Gender-based violence activists say that they will be keenly watching to see if President Cyril Ramaphosa takes a strong stance in addressing and ending the surge of violence against women and children. The president, of course, will be delivering the State of the Nation address at the Cape Town City Hall tomorrow. Very most anticipated speech. It's likely to be his toughest, considering all kinds of challenges that the country is facing today, like GBV. Let's talk more on this with Sonke, Gender Justice, Given Sigauqwe. Given, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I guess, in a way, gender-based violence continues as the scourge in our country and as an epidemic. You would be expecting to hear a little bit more round about the way forward, because a number of things have happened already, including improved legislation, but that's not enough.
Definitely, President. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to your listeners. As we are speaking today, it's just heinous crime on women, you know. With improved legislation, there is still violence that's occurring on women. The thing is, then, is that we are not, at this point, we are not waiting on what the president will say. More than anything, we are waiting on what the president will do. More than a year later, several promises were made, of course, one of which were the tweaking and introduction and the signing of the laws that we very much welcome. But apart from that, we must also remember that at that very State of the Nation address of 2021, the president, a week before that, had spoken about the GBVF response fund, for example, which is a consortium of private sector entities. It was said at that time that there was about 128 million put together. Till this day, fast forward a year later, nothing has been said about that particular fund. Nothing has been said about the distribution of the funds. Nothing has been said about the monitoring of the funds. But most importantly, and I think I speak for all of civil society when I say this, we have waited a very long time for the implementation of the National Strategic Plan on GBV and femicide. We've been calling for the implementation, for the acknowledgement of this policy for some time. And I mean, we were all very excited when the president confirmed that he had acknowledged the policy and acknowledged it as far-reaching and progressive. But now, as we are approaching another State of Nation address, I can confirm to you that the National Council that is meant to monitor that very NSP has not been elected. So how can we then implement an NSP without a committee that includes obviously civil society and government members to ensure the fast-tracking of the NSP, but also the correct implementation of this policy that we've been calling for years?
Now, that's one example you're using of a lack of action or something that's not been implemented or is taking time to implement. So when you are listening tomorrow, given to the President's State of the Nation address from a gender activist, from an anti-GBV perspective, what are these things you're going to want to hear more of that will indicate to you that the commitment to eradicate the scourge of GBV on behalf of government is real?
We expect the government to unreservedly fund programs. Then there are several programs that are run across civil society that deal with the systemic problem. So I'll give you an example. I've already mentioned that we welcome, for example, the signing of the 3 anti-GBV bills. I believe they are a very right and progressive step towards dealing with the scourge. But we must remember something when it comes to legal issues. Legal issues deal with after-the-fact issues. So there needs to be a survivor for there to be justice. There needs to be a survivor for there to be stringent laws. But what about those who don't survive? So now it is important that the government doubles up on its efforts. While we welcome as I've already said, the change in legislation, because we know that part of the reason why we have a very high number of underreporting when it comes to crimes of GBV is because the lack of faith in the justice system. So we are happy there are those tweaks that are being made. But apart from that, we need to acknowledge the fact that dealing with GBV requires a multifaceted approach. Because, as I've already said, this is a systemic problem. And one of the ways to do this is for the government to pump money into institutions that do the groundwork, that deal with toxic masculinity on a day-to-day basis, that deal with the violence and address the violence through effective programs.
Yeah, so I mean, the President's State of the Nation address broadly sets a high-level thing, that very little detail there. But what you'd want to see, from what I'm hearing, is clear commitment to government to say that going forward they will fund the fight against GBV properly and implement things and implement that commitment fully and properly. So the laws are fine. You welcome that. We need more funding and that kind of commitment in the fight against GBV. But each time I speak to you, given or other of your colleagues in this space in the fight against GBV, they also point out that societally the challenges are in the family units. And currently we know that there's a huge battle in the country, and the pandemic has exacerbated the issue of livelihoods. Would you want to hear the State of the Nation address how the livelihoods of the poor might be improved? Because we hear that that could be part of the problem as well, where many vulnerable women fall victims to violence.
Of course, Dan. Even at the start of the violence, civil society, we came out in numbers to and even anticipate a possible rise in GBV cases because, as I've already said, that it's a multifaceted problem. And in those conditions where, for example, some survivors are not able to leave their households, or some survivors do not have access to particular institutions of protection, or sometimes the stress of one's socio-economic possibilities. We had anticipated that very detrimental cocktail, and that's one of the things, actually, that we expect the government to tackle, because we must remember that even one's socio-economic conditions play a factor into one's exposure to violence, but sometimes reaction that is violent. So without question, we expect the government to speak, rather to take us through a plan that will ensure that the pressures and the efforts that contributed to certain households being more violent than others are tackled.
Okay, thank you very much for your views. Sonke, Gender Justice is given Sigauqwe just a day before the delivery of that State of the Nation address, and what the anti-GBV activists are expecting to hear from the President, and clear commitment for funding, for more funding of anti-GBV programs.